What's up, everyone? It's me, Johnny. So over the past day or so, there's been a bunch of pieces of UFC news that I want to talk about in today's video. I'm trying to keep the channel as active as possible in between podcast episodes, especially because as we get closer to Rob's fight with Khamzat Chimaev, like he usually does, he will take some time away from the podcast, and obviously he needs to go overseas to fight the guy. So I'm just trying to prepare for that eventuality, and I'm noticing that longer videos on the channel do much better than the shorter one. So instead of talking about just one news topic when it comes to UFC, I'm going to combine together several, and we have some interesting topics to talk about today. First of all, Merab Dvalishvili has sustained a cut above his left eye, I believe it was, which has put in doubt potentially his upcoming title shot against Sean O'Malley. So we'll be talking about that from the get-go. Second of all, I do want to talk about Khalil Rountree against Alex Pereira. I haven't had the opportunity to speak about this booking yet, properly anyways. And Dana White recently, I think it was in the post-fight presser for the Contender series, he shared why this fight was booked, like why it was Khalil Rountree as opposed to Magomed Ankalaev. So we'll be talking about that second of all. Third, I do want to have a bit of a general chat about the middleweight division and share my opinions as to who I believe should be next for the middleweight title. Obviously, Dricus Du Plessis just beat Israel Adesanya, and there's a lot of talk as to who should be next, so we'll be getting to that, and obviously I'm going to have my biases when it comes to that topic. And finally, the latest UFC rankings are up since UFC 305 has concluded, and I don't agree with all of the rankings as they stand right now. I believe some fighters have been hard done by just a little bit. So let's get into all of that. If you enjoy this video, please like, subscribe if you're new. But let's talk about Merab Dvalishvili's cut. So he uploaded a post to Instagram where he showed that he had a little bit of a cut above his left eye. It wasn't the biggest cut in the world, but he had a significant cut that probably is going to need stitches or glue of some sort, right? I'm just speculating here, but it's going to have to be closed up, in some way. And this has made people worry that he might not be ready now for his upcoming title shot against Sean O'Malley at Noche UFC 306. Is it still called Noche UFC? UFC 306 or Noche UFC, whatever it's called, the one that's happening in the Sphere. Obviously, Merab was meant to be, and it still is meant to be, fighting Sean O'Malley for the title. And after seeing that cut, a lot of people are worried that this fight might have to be rebooked, or it might be axed, or maybe an alternate opponent has to be found for Merab if that eye cut can't heal in time. And it wasn't just fans that were worried. Also, Sean O'Malley was a little bit worried and concerned as well, because he responded by saying, "This little effing rat better not pull out, I swear to God." And he posted that to Twitter. Now, Merab, since uploading that post, did say, "Calm down, it's all good, just a little training injury." A little bit more than just a little training injury, but I get his point. He's never pulled out of a fight, and he never will. I'm coming for you, O'Malley. Stronger than ever. Vamos. By the way, as an aside, I'm very interested to see who's going to be behind who the people are going to be behind in this fight. Are they going to be supporting Merab, given how popular he is online, or are they going to be supporting Sean O'Malley? That's just an aside. Share your thoughts in the comments below. But Merab says it's fine. Now, my heart skipped a beat a little bit because we remember what happened with Charles Oliveira, right? When Charles Oliveira got that nasty cut before the Islam Makhachev fight, obviously he had to be pulled out of that fight. He couldn't fight Islam Makhachev, and he didn't get his title opportunity because the next fight that he had was against Arman Tsarukyan, and he ended up losing that fight. So I was a little worried for Merab that potentially he has to be pulled out of this fight, and Dana White isn't exactly happy. And if that had to happen, there was every chance that Merab doesn't get his title shot and he has to fight someone else down in the rankings. And this is what Dana White had to say in the post-fight presser of the Contender series. He's saying, yeah, the whole world knows about Merab's cut. He posted it. Our guys, and he's referring to the UFC fighters, our guys are so dumb, it's next level unbelievable. And he refers to how in boxing, when there's injuries and cuts or whatever that are sustained in camps, you don't hear about it. Typically, you don't hear about it because it's bad to share that news, right? It's something that an opponent can also take advantage of. So in boxing, you don't really see it. But in MMA and UFC, and he's right, that stuff is shared instantly on Instagram and shared instantly on social media. And Dana White that rubbed him the wrong way. He wasn't exactly happy with Merab. And he also emphasized the point that, why would you share that news when even if you are ready, even if it heals in time, it's still going to be a little bit compromised, and you're just putting a big target on your face or wherever the cut is for your opponent to target. Because what if Sean O'Malley is like, all right, I want to target that left eye, open it up again. And if the cut's severe enough, he has to lose the fight. Like, the fight has to be called. So I get what Dana White is saying. It is a little bit silly. Now, if the cut obviously was bad enough to call the fight and he obviously can't fight, hypothetically, then you share it. People have to know. But if it's a little cut, and Merab says it's a little cut and it's going to heal in time, I think it's like 24 days away or something like that, UFC 306. If it's just a little cut, don't say anything. Let it heal. Eventually, people will probably figure it out. They'll see the little cut above your eye. But if it heals well enough, it might just be like, I have a cut on my thumb right now, and it doesn't look that bad as it did initially. So if it healed up in time and it didn't look that bad, people would be none the wiser probably. They're like, oh yeah, he got a little bit of a cut in training. Rob gets cuts in training and he gets hit in the face all the time. He doesn't say, oh, look what happened to me. It's part of the process. It's part of training. So I agree with Dana White. It was a little bit silly. Merab, I love you. I would love to see how he goes in this fight. I just don't want this fight to be called. I don't want this fight to be rebooked. I don't want another person in there. I want to see Sean O'Malley against Merab Dvalishvili. So hopefully the cut heals. And next time, don't post about it. I completely agree with Dana White on this one. Next up, let's talk about Khalil Rountree against Alex Pereira. So a lot of people still are not convinced that Khalil Rountree is deserved of this opportunity to fight for the light heavyweight title against Alex Pereira. And this is specifically in October at UFC 307. Now, it's not just fans that are a bit like confused by this booking. It's also other fighters as well, and specifically, as you would imagine, in the light heavyweight division. So we had Yuri, we had Jamal Hill, we had Ankalaev, we had Jan. All of them were like, why the hell is Khalil Rountree getting this opportunity? All of them obviously believe that they have more of a stake and more of a claim to be fighting Alex Pereira for the title. Now, on paper, there's no denying this is a very exciting fight. It's a banger. Like, they're both knockout artists. I'm actually very much looking forward to this fight. Probably I'd be looking forward more to this fight versus, a rematch with Hill versus a rematch with Yuri. We've seen that twice now. Even more so than Ankalaev. Even though Ankalaev says he wants to stand there and bang, he's not going to bang as well as Khalil Rountree. And I don't want to see that rematch again with Jan either. So I think this is probably the most exciting fight to be making in the division. And the UFC at the end of the day is a business. So on paper, exciting fight. I cannot wait to bloody watch it, right? And Rountree has emphasized he's not going to try and take Alex down. He's never shot a takedown in his career, which is crazy to say, but it is true. He hasn't. And he mentioned that this fight can't not be exciting, and it's true. So even if you might not necessarily agree with the booking, you can't deny you're going to be there. You're going to watch that fight, right? It's going to be a very, very exciting fight. But if I was to put that to the side, and let's look at meritocracy, absolutely Magomed Ankalaev should be the one fighting. Absolutely. He is the number one contender. He is ahead of the rankings, significantly so when it comes to him versus Khalil Rountree. And I said this, it has to be Magomed Ankalaev. It has to be him that fought Alex Pereira next. And I was saying this, mind you, before this fight with Khalil Rountree was booked. So I understand, I'm very well aware that Magomed Ankalaev should be fighting for the title. So I'm a bit in two minds about this because I'm excited for the Khalil Rountree fight, but I also agree that Magomed Ankalaev should be the one fighting. And I think most people agree with that stance. Now, Dana White, again in the post-fight presser of the Contender series, he explained the thought process. And I'm just going to lay this out and we're going to see what we think about it. So he was like, look, Magomed Ankalaev was already booked. He's fighting Rakic, right? He's fighting Rakic very, very soon. And they obviously really needed, I don't think he said this exactly, but you can read between the lines a little bit. Clearly, they needed a good main event for UFC 307. If we didn't get this fight booked, we'd be having Raquel Pennington against Juliana Pena. And that's not the most exciting main event, right? Not the most exciting main event. And I'm not a guy that's against women's fighters, but just in the women's division, this booking doesn't make the most sense to me personally. And I would have preferred to have seen a different fight booked in that division. But, they needed a banger of a main event for UFC 307. Otherwise, it wouldn't sell as well and everything that comes associated with that. So they were like, all right, what do we do? Who do we look to? And clearly they pulled out the phone and they called the guy that they keep calling to save cards. UFC 300, the other one that Alex saved. There's been so many, I lose count of the freaking numbers. Like, Alex Pereira has saved their cards so often, right? He's come in and not just like been in the main event. He's put on a fantastic main event every single bloody time, knocking out Yuri, knocking out, Hill. He's always been that guy. So, of course, they're going to try and reach out to him again and try and get Alex Pereira booked. And then when you look at that from that perspective, who would he fight? They went down the list. And they're like, and this is what Dana said, well, look, Rakic is already booked against Magomed Ankalaev. We're not going to change that. And then you keep going down the list, kind of like I did before. Alex has already beat Yuri twice. It was a pretty bad defeat for Yuri. He already beat Jamal Hill once this year at UFC 300. He's also beat Jan, but Jan fight was much closer. It was a split decision. So a bit more of a case for Jan to be fighting Alex Pereira. However, he did on paper beat Jan. Rakic also just lost. Krylov, I don't know what the hell's happening with Nikita Krylov. I think he's getting a surgery on his shoulder or something like that. So Krylov hasn't fought since last year, and I think it's because of that surgery, so he's obviously not going to be booked. And Volkan Ozdemir has just 2 recent wins compared to Khalil Rountree's 5 streak. So when you look at it from that perspective, they needed a main event for UFC 307. Ankalaev was already booked. You go down the list like that, it makes a lot of sense that Rountree was picked. For when you look at it from that perspective. But now I'm going to play devil's advocate a little bit and go against a bit what Dana White has said. The only reason why Ankalaev was booked is because you booked him. You know what I mean? And let's remember this. I was always confused as to why Ankalaev was booked against Rakic in the first place. It didn't make sense to me. Like, this was before the Rountree and Alex Pereira fight was booked, right, for the title. Before that fight also confused me. I was like, well, why is Ankalaev fighting Rakic? Like, Ankalaev is the number 1 contender. He should be fighting Alex Pereira next. And not only is he not fighting Alex Pereira, he's fighting Rakic, who's lower down on the rankings and who also just lost. So that didn't make sense to me whatsoever. And the only reason why he's booked is because you, the UFC, you booked him. So yes, after the fact, the process makes sense when you go down the list, but you're only in that position because you booked Magomed Ankalaev. And let's be real, you can change the booking if you want. You can absolutely change the booking. You can say, you know what? No, we need a proper contender for Alex Pereira. Let's say I give them the benefit of the doubt that Alex Pereira wasn't ready to fight Magomed Ankalaev. He was still recovering from his toe injury or whatever. And that's why they booked the Rakic fight. And then after that, Alex Pereira is like, oh, I'm ready to go. Let's give them the benefit of the doubt in that regard. Let's say after he said, my toes are fine. I'm ready to fight whenever you need me. Then just change the fight. If you wanted Ankalaev to fight Pereira and he couldn't because of the injury, and now he can, just book that fight. Don't just keep Ankalaev in the fight with Rakic that you're only booked because Alex Pereira was injured. Even if I was giving them the benefit of the doubt, they can still change the booking. They can still change the fight. So I never thought that the fight against Rakic made sense anyways. And also as well, let's be honest about the situation. Khalil Rountree is coming off a suspension. Now, I've always been very sympathetic when it comes to Rountree because, yes, he popped positive. I can't remember what the substance was, but it was a voluntary, like he said, I took this thing unintentionally. That was his story. I'm going to go to the authority and say, hey, I'm popped. Took something that I wasn't meant to. I'm going to pop positive, and he did pop positive. And because of that, he got a much shorter sentence that probably he otherwise would have, right? So I'm very sympathetic towards Rountree. I know a lot of people aren't, but I actually do believe his story. He looks and he sounds like a genuine guy, right? I've always liked Rountree as a fighter, and also every time he talks, he seems like a nice dude. But is it the best look to have him fighting? Not just fighting, but fighting for the title next? Coming straight off a suspension like that? I don't know. Maybe give him a tune-up fight. Maybe give him a different fight. Maybe don't, thrust him right into the main event scene where that's going to be highlighted, right? Where that's going to get the potential ire of journalists and media and whatever. Because it's going to be a talking point. It's going to be a talking point. So I don't, on paper, when it comes to merit, I don't agree with Pereira versus Rountree. I still think it's going to be a fun fight. I'll still be there to watch it. I do believe Ankalaev should be the one that fights Pereira. But look, he's probably going to beat Rakic, and then he'll fight Pereira after that. I don't know if there's something about, like, how can Ankalaev fight in the USA, or do they just want to keep him for the Middle East because he draws a crowd? I don't know. Like, I don't think a lot of people... Yeah, anyway, I'm going to stop there, but those are my thoughts. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Otherwise, this video is going to be too long. But now let's talk about the middleweight division. So, There's been a lot of talk, naturally, over the past few days since Dricus beat Israel as to who should be fighting Dricus next for the middleweight title. Now, I have to go back to Dana White's comments. Dana White recently said, and I got the quote here, Sean is ranked #1 in the world. He deserves the fight. And this is the bit that I want to emphasize because everyone has taken Dana's comments and said Sean's next. Sean's next. Sean's going to fight Dricus next. But this is what he said, word for word. But you never know what can happen and how these fights can play out. We've got a lot of fun things happening in the middleweight division coming into 2025. Now, he did finish that whole paragraph off by saying Strickland deserves it. But in my opinion, I've said this, I think he is leaving the door open for something like a Rob Whittaker versus Khamzat Chimaev fight to really wow everyone, right? I think the way that he's worded that, he's not saying that Sean is going to be fighting the winner of Dricus and Israel when he made that comment because that fight hadn't happened yet. That's not what he said. He said that Sean's #1, he deserves it, and he emphasized at the end that he deserved it. But he didn't say definitively that it's going to happen. I think he left the window open by saying, we've got a bunch of exciting things happening in middleweight division, and of course, the Rob fight against Khamzat was already booked at that point. I think he was implicitly referring to that fight. And even DC touched on this recently as well when he said, I think the worry for Sean Strickland is he beat Paulo Costa, and Rob Whittaker has also beaten Paulo Costa in a much better fashion, mind you. More exciting fashion, I should say. He also beat Ikram Alaskarov. If he puts Chimaev behind him, I know he already lost to the champion, but it would make a very compelling argument that he should be next. Sean lost to the champion as well. Let's remember that. They both lost to Sean, to Dricus. Du Plessis wants Robert Whittaker to win. He needs Robert Whittaker to win. Why does he need Robert Whittaker to win? I don't agree with that. I'm sure he wants Robert Whittaker to win. I mean, like Dricus, I think Rob's his favorite fighter, and he has a lot of respect. He believes that Rob is the most deserving if he was to be Khamzat, but why does he need Rob to win? Would he prefer the Rob fight over Sean Strickland? I don't know. But DC then went on to say, there's a bit of a tone in Dana's voice that you don't believe, like what he's telling you is actually certain. This is what DC is saying. I didn't hear that tone. I didn't hear that for sure tone that Sean Strickland is next. And I completely agree. I think he is leaving the door open. And just because Sean Strickland is the #1 contender doesn't mean he's going to get the fight, right? I'm sure that for one, the UFC isn't happy with Sean just sitting on his hands and not putting his hand up to have exciting fights and to help the UFC make money. I'm sure the UFC isn't happy about that. And also, what the hell we just saw with Khalil Rountree against Alex Pereira. The #1 contender doesn't always get the fight, even though on paper he deserves it and whatever, and Dana says one thing or another, doesn't mean it always happens. And look, there's every chance as well that Pereira might go down to fight Dricus, but now that the Rountree fight is booked, I don't see that happening. And if Dana's not happy for Pereira to go up to heavyweight to fight Aspinall or Jones or whatever, equally, I don't think he wants him to go back down to middleweight to fight Dricus. I think he wants him to stay at light heavyweight. He's got work to do in light heavyweight. But let's be real about this situation. Let's be completely real. The fight that should have been booked from day one, from the get-go, was not Rob Whittaker against Khamzat Chimaev, was not Sean Strickland fighting the winner of Dricus versus Israel. It should have been Rob versus Sean Strickland. That should have been the fight. That's literally what everybody was saying when Rob KO'd Alaskarov. Everyone was like, it should be Rob versus Sean Strickland as a title eliminator, right? Because Sean, yes, it was a very close fight with Dricus, and he's upset about it. And then he went on to beat Paulo Costa. But when does beating Paulo Costa give you a title opportunity? Remembering that Rob just beat Paulo Costa as well, and then Ikram Alaskarov. So, and they both also lost to Dricus. Yes, Sean's loss to Dricus was much different, but they still both on paper lost to Dricus. And then Rob went on to win 2 fights, and then Strickland went on to win a very boring fight against Costa, who just lost against Rob. So in my mind, they both have an equal claim, so they should have fought. They should have had a title contender fight, and I'm sure that's what the UFC wanted. But Sean Strickland went on this tirade and was like, no, I don't need to fight Rob. I'm the #1 contender. I'm not going to fight Rob. So what does Rob do in that situation? He asks for the Khamzat fight. He says, what am I going to do? I'm just going to sit here and do nothing? No, I want to fight Khamzat. I don't agree that Khamzat should be in that position, right? I don't agree that potentially Khamzat is in a title contender fight in the middleweight division because he's not fought a proper middleweight. He beat Usman on short notice. He isn't a proper middleweight, right? I don't believe that Khamzat should be in that position. Sean Strickland should have been in that position. I believe, yes, he deserved to be in that position. But now because Sean's sitting on his hands, Khamzat has to be in there. I don't agree with Khamzat being in there. But Rob, yeah, what is he going to do? He's going to try and take the fight that he believes is going to elevate him to the title shot. It's better than sitting on your hands, especially when you've got someone like Sean Strickland, in the eyes of Dana potentially has a little bit more of a claim. Rob needs to make a statement. Hey, I'm the top contender here. I just beat Costa. I just KO'd Alex, and I just beat Khamzat. I should be the one deserving for a title. And that's exactly what the champion believes, Dricus, as well. So, look, I'm getting a little bit heated about this, but if Rob does go on to beat Khamzat Chimaev, and of course it's a hypothetical, I believe he's more deserving than Sean Strickland, but hindsight being 2020, it should have been Rob versus Sean Strickland. That should have been the fight to mate, and Khamzat Chimaev should have fought someone else. In all honesty, he probably should be fighting someone like Israel Adesanya, because that'd be a banger of a fight. But I don't know if Israel would want to take that fight. Anyways, that's all I'm saying. Finally, let's talk about the UFC rankings. So after UFC 305, there's been some changes in the rankings for the UFC. So Dricus Du Plessis, when it comes to the pound-for-pound rankings, he's moved to 6th spot behind Belal, Ilya, Jones, Pereira, and Islam. Now, moving to 6th for him, it does make sense. I think there is an argument that potentially, Dricus should be ahead of at least Belal and Ilya. On paper, if you look at who Dricus has beaten, 3 former middleweight champions, Israel, Sean Strickland, and Rob Whittaker, to me, that's a little bit better than Ilya. I know Ilya KO'd Volk. Who else did he KO? Josh Emmett, Bryce Mitchell, and Jai Herbert. And then you have Belal, who's beaten Leon Edwards, Gilbert Burns, Sean Brady, Vicente Luque, Wonderboy, etc. I think Dricus's, resume is better. I think he is a better pound-for-pound fighter than Belal and that Ilya Topuria. I would make the argument that he should be at least 5th, if not 4th, ahead of Ilya Topuria. I just think, especially because of his last 3 fights, he's really been underestimated. After beating Sean, no one believed that he beat him. When he beat Rob, everyone's like, that's a fluke. No, this guy is genuine because he literally just beat Israel Adesanya via submission. That's never happened before. I would argue that Dricus should be at least 1 or 2 spots above in the rankings, but that's not the thing that I have the most issue with, right? Also as well, Steve Erceg has dropped in the rankings, understandably, but he's below Mateus Nicolau. That doesn't make any sense to me. Nicolau has 2 losses recently. Yes, Erceg has 2 losses, but why does that make Erceg below Nicolau? That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. They both have 2 losses, and also one of Erceg's losses was a very close fight against Pantoja, who's the champion, and he's made a lot of fans because of that fight. But now he's below Nicolau because he got knocked out by Kai Kara-France. That doesn't make sense to me. But here's the thing that I have the most issue with. So Dan Hooker moves up to 5. Completely agree. Dan Hooker is a badass man. He's a beast. It was a war with Gamrot. I'm so bloody happy for him. I agree that it should be 5, and he sets him up to fight people like Oliveira, like Gaethje, potentially Dustin Poirier if he wants to take that fight, etc., etc., etc. What I don't agree with is that Mateusz Gamrot has now dropped to 8th. He was 5th, and now he's 8th. How does that make any sense? By dropping to 8th, he's now lower than Michael Chandler, who hasn't fought in 2 years, and that recent fight was a loss. And he's also below Beneil Dariush, who's just lost to Sarukian and Oliveira. So Gamrot, what? He's beaten so many of the top-ranked guys. He was on a win streak before that fight with Dan Hooker, and then he loses one, so now he's below Chandler and he's below Beneil Dariush. That doesn't make sense. The only mitigating factor is that, Gamrot lost to Beneil, but before that, who does he beat? Fiziev, Dos Anjos, Jalen Turner. The only loss that he has recently is a very competitive, close loss to Dan Hooker. So why is he 8? He should just be 6. He should be ahead of Michael Chandler. Am I crazy in saying that? Let me know what you think in the comments below. And of course, as I mentioned, let me know what you thought of this video. It's a little bit all over the place, I believe. I think I can do it better next time. But this is meant to be a little bit of a tester video. So let me know what you think. And until next time, this has been Johnny. Please take care of yourselves, and I will see you in the next video.